Weekly Download, a podcast about interesting games, industry news.
Brought to you by Big Games Machine.
Hello. Welcome back to the Weekly Download. I feel honoured to be saying those words again, Alex.
Oh, it's
Great
good to
job.
have you back.
I know it feels good to be bad. To be back.
Bad to the bone.
I think I'm
over
quite
there.
good. I think I'm quite good at hosting podcasts. But yes, welcome back to the Weekly Download. I have returned after my absence. That is me, Tom. Today I am joined by my co-host, Alex, who
Your standard
has
co-host,
done
your boring, run-of-the-mill, most week co-host.
well, I like it. I like our
Very
ability
happy.
to take the biggest stories of the week and break them down and
It was
have
not
a
a complaint.
productive
I want to be
conversation.
very clear.
It was not implied. Well, here we are. We're back with another week. It's been, I feel like we always say this, another very busy week. Some really big stories, some good, some bad. We're going to be taking a look at a few today, 3 big ones. So we're going to be looking at the news that Nintendo have announced this week. That is that they're doing a price drop of sorts for their digital games in the US, following on from having already done that in the EU, in Europe and in Japan from when the Switch 2 came out last year. So now that's going to be heading over to the US from May. We're also going to be taking a little look at the news from Epic Games this week, who have laid off 1,000 employees due to a decline in engagement with Fortnite being the main reason that Tim Sweeney has cited for that. And then we'll also take a little look at the quite uplifting news, I think, if you're a fan of Square Enix. Square Enix was Metacritic's #1 publisher for 2025, which is their first time ever taking that prestigious crown, I guess. I think it's Metacritic seems to be the aggregator for games and reviews, so feels like a worthy crown for Square Enix.
It's an interesting one that I think we're definitely going to discuss when we get there in more depth.
We will. When we
it's
get there,
it's definitely an achievement.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what we'll be looking at this week. So we'll take a small break, come right back, and we'll start with this news around Nintendo. And we are going to kick off this week's episode with the news that Nintendo is dropping the price of its digital games for the Switch 2 exclusively. So just Switch 2 games in the US and Canada, starting from May this year. The first game to take advantage of this price split is going to be Yoshi and the Mysterious Book, which comes out in May, hence why it's happening in May. And so there'll be a digital price of $59.99. The physical will be $60.99, so around that $10 difference. Nintendo has said that the main reason for this is to reflect the different costs that are associated with producing and distributing each format. I don't need to tell you, Alex, that digital games don't have cartridges. They don't need to be shipped. They don't have retail margins that Nintendo need to worry about. So that's kind of the reason for those changes.
They also don't have resale value. If you
They
buy a
don't.
digital product, that's it. That's your money in Nintendo's pocket. No one else is getting that game.
Very
So,
true, which no doubt has motivated things. I think it's worth clarifying that Nintendo has come out after announcing this and reiterated that this isn't a price increase for physical games. This is a discount on digital purchases, and that kind of is true. As we said in the introduction to this episode, this is something which we're based in the UK. Europe and Japan have seen this since the Switch 2 came out. I think Mario Kart, as an example, I think that digitally that retails, I think that's $66.99, and then the price for the physical is £75. So just one example that we have already seen that. So this isn't something brand new. This is just coming to the US, which is why it is a big story.
Absolutely. And, I don't think anybody knows the price of Mario Kart. They buy it with the system and it's just a sunk cost, isn't it? I've never even thought to look how much it was. But it was, I know this is, I think I've been singing this since we first started doing the podcast in terms of what the deal was that essentially publishers made with their audience when they move to digital. It's like, it's gonna mean they're not gonna have to ship things. Physical stores are going to be reduced. like the shipping, the production costs, the paper elements, with cartridges, even more so, the cost of putting those together is all going to be taken out of the equation, and therefore the cost can come down. And initially, I think there was, because the same deal was made when you jump from cartridges to CDs, that the cost of production would be lower. And I think at that point they didn't realize that, there were costs incurred that maybe are harder to see. Like, it's when you put things on CD, there needs to be more information. When you when you move to digital, two things happen. One, there is no longer a cap in the same way, much like when you move from a magazine to a website, you can squeeze as much on as you like, and you can be, have all kind of weird parts to that.
I love the idea of like getting to the end of a website. It's like last page.
Yes.
That's a bit harder to do on a
Finally.
website than it is to do in a magazine. I'm not being facetious, but
no.
It's very true.
Yeah. And with games, the idea, and it started to happen where, games came out and they became live services, or updates come later, or you could make fixes and things. And there's push and pulls to all of that in terms of the cost and what happens. But in most people's heads, I'm not having to go out and buy it. The convenience cost of being able to do it from my home does not outweigh the physical production, all the costs there. So why weren't we seeing it cheaper from before, across the board for everything?
Well, I think in it, I feel like till this point, it's kind of been the opposite, where in a lot of cases, because Nintendo aside, I think Nintendo, you don't really see sales in any regard. But if you look at PlayStation as a really easy example, the retail price of a digital PlayStation game it'll go on sale, but it's kind of that hard $70 or £70 in the UK, whereas quite quickly after a game comes out, you could get the physical for much cheaper. Not the case with Nintendo, but it feels like this is one of the first times where we're seeing, as you've said, Alex, that promise come to fruition in terms of, well, I think we can recognize that one of the issues the Switch 2 cartridges have is that they're expensive to buy. Nintendo don't offer many sizes of cartridges. Memory components, storage, that's all going up in price as well. But... So, yeah, I think something I'd want to ask you is, I know you in the past have been you're more digital now than you were. Not yourself, but your collection of games. From your perspective, do you think this is kind of like a tax on physical games? Do you think this will drive more people who play, who do pick up physical games? Do you think this is enough of a price change to make more people go digital?
I don't think so. I think, as you said, like all digital things are kind of have a locked and fixed in price. If you go online, if you're buying a physical version online, they almost all start lower than RRP anyway. So I do wonder how much this is going to filter. People will probably see the price go up, but they're probably going to be closer to the digital price than Nintendo's declaring off the bat. That's, as you've alluded to, likely going to be different for Nintendo, because they're one of the few companies that retain that kind of RRP or SRP, depending on where you are, across digital or across the lifespan of their games. But I think anybody that's on physical is probably not doing it for convenience's sake. They're probably doing it either because they want to collect. Like, certainly that's a fact for some of them. They want to resell it, which is going to remain in the same element. They might be sharing it between family members in kind of families like that, where they want to hand the cartridge around if that's the easiest way to do it. And I think they've got to accept that having all of those benefits probably do. I don't see it as a tax, but they do come with a cost. I sit here being like, should they pay more? Yes, there's physical elements that, obviously physical elements. The elements of producing it physically drives the cost up.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think that you do have to recognize that. I think it's similar to the game key card controversy, where there's reasons why some publishers are choosing to use those related to loading speeds and asset being able to stream assets. I also think the other side of that is that it is cheaper to use that as opposed to cartridges, and I think you do have to consider that. If you want to, I'm very PlayStation wise, I'm kind of like 80% digital, 20% physical. With Nintendo, I've always been very much, I like I like the boxes, I like the cartridges. I don't mind paying that additional cost because, as you've said, if I get a new game and I don't like it, if I get it physically, I can very easily sell it on. So that's one of the factors where, to me, I think I don't mind paying a little bit more because it's an insurance that I don't get if I go and spend, £60, which is the price of these games now, on a digital one. And if I don't like it, well, I'm stuck with it.
There is another factor. Name another product that you can buy physically and digitally where the digital version isn't multiple levels cheaper. Kindle, music, like they're all significantly cheaper because all of the cost in that is tied up in the production. Games have the updates elements, the ongoing support, the size of the bandwidth and server size required on the other end is obviously higher than those. But I can't think of another project that you can buy digitally and physically where the cost is still this comparable, actually. So I think we might be looking at this the wrong way round, which is like, why hasn't it already happened? Of it being cheaper? Why wasn't it always the case?
On that note, then, do you think? I mean, the question I wrote down was, do you think we'll see more third parties do this on the Switch too? But I guess the bigger question is, do you think we'll see across the board more platform holders who are obviously not Steam, but if we look at PlayStation, again, not to bring them back up, but could we see Sony do something similar now that Nintendo have kind of greenlit this approach, and Sony could be like, okay, well, we'll do something similar?
I don't know how to answer that question simply because I don't know what the cut taken by Nintendo or PlayStation are to have the branding, to have everything on the physical copy over the digital copy. It seems to be, across the board, it's like 30%, right, of your whatever money comes in goes to the platform holder when you do things digitally. I don't know how that converts between the platforms when it comes to discs and the cartridges. And I think that's going to be what dictates whether that change is there.
Yeah. I guess it's something then we might see it start to happen. I wonder if it's something where Nintendo might encourage it.
That would be
maybe if I'm trying to think, I know there's the Dusk Bloods game. Is that, I don't know if that's an Elden Ring thing. I don't think it is. I know it's from Soft. It's from Soft, but I don't know if it's. But I wonder, because that's going to be a Switch 2 exclusive, if Nintendo will pressure from Soft to be like, hey, can you kind of embrace what we're doing here because we want to set this as a standard? They don't have that control over other third parties, but I do wonder if, because it's going to be an exclusive, they might be able to.
I was going to say,
win them round.
I think in that case it's quite likely. But again, Nintendo have the power to sweeten the pot on that. They can take less of a cut. There's all sorts of things they can do on the back end. The question becomes like, is this something that makes financial sense for entirely third party publishers to undertake?
It clearly does to Nintendo. It clearly makes sense to Nintendo. Yeah, I think we'll wrap here. But yeah, this isn't anything new for Nintendo. They have been doing this since the Switch 2 launched in other regions. So anyone reading this, anyone listening who's not in the US, don't expect those prices to change. It's not, Mario Kart's not going to get any cheaper. If you didn't get the bundle, then you're out of luck. But yeah, this is interesting. Lots of questions. I wonder if before the end of the year we will see other people kind of start taking part in this. I wonder what the reaction will be more broadly, because I do think this is a fairly consumer friendly move. I think it offers people a cheaper way to get games. I know that there's been a lot of questions and complaints about the pricing of Switch 2 games, but I look at that digital price for Yoshi and I think, well, $60 is what people have paid for Switch games for nearly 10 years at this point. So that's kind of the de facto price, but the physical's a bit more. So there's the trade-off.
My final thought with that in mind is, if it's embraced by multiple people across multiple platforms, how long is it until the physical price goes up and the digital price comes up to what the physical price is now? And the argument becomes, well, you can still buy the game for $60, but you've got to get it digitally.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that's it, isn't it? That it's a choice. To some people, it might be a false choice. To me, it would be, because I really do like... There's no way I'm ever going to get a Zelda game digitally. I ain't doing that. Like that won't happen. So I'm always going to pay the premium.
I'm on the full digital train. I travel enough. I don't want to be swapping cartridges.
No, I know you're embracing the future. I'm the Luddite over here who's I'm saying that I've got lots of game key cards. I just love cartridges. It's just
I
a little...
I was like that, and then embraced digital fully for mobile, or portable, I should say. And then when I couldn't get a physical edition PS5, I became
just
fully
like,
digital.
Screw this.
So I decided then.
Fine. But yeah, we'll wrap there, and when we come back, we're going to take a look at this news around Epic. And our next story for today, we're going to be taking a look at the very big news from Epic Games this week. Of course, if your head's been in the sand for 10 years, the creators of Fortnite, but they've announced that 1,000 employees are going to be laid off. That's around 20% of the total workforce. CEO Tim Sweeney released a statement and was very explicit about the fact that Epic is spending significantly more than we're making. The main reason that this is seemingly happening is because there's been a real decline in the engagement with Fortnite. To go a bit mathematical, few data points for you. We've seen a big dip in monthly active players on on Fortnite, on the Fortnite ecosystem, and total hours played across the Epic ecosystem fell by 14% year on year in 2025, which is substantial. You got to think we're playing with very big numbers here, so that 14% is going to be huge. Alongside the layoffs, Epic also confirmed that it's closing some of its experimental modes within Fortnite due to underperformance. So we're looking at Rocket Racing, Fortnite Ballistic, which was their CSGO style 5 shooter, as well as Festival Battle Stage, which is the Guitar Hero style music mode. I think something, again, I'll get through all this and then I'll open up things to you, Alex. Something that I think is really interesting is that Tim Sweeney explicitly spoke about the fact that Epic's campaigning against Apple and Google has cost them a lot of money. And the fact that they've not been on those storefronts for years at this point has affected them. Like, they've lost revenue through that as well. And then the final point before we'll open things up is one of the other things that Tim Sweeney said was that these layoffs are not related to AI. And we've seen companies like Amazon who have cited AI efficiency as being a big reason for cuts. But Tim Sweeney, very clear from what he said, is that this is simply because their Epic are spending too much, and that they've had these legal cases, they've had the big dip with Fortnite engagement, and they need to future-proof the company, and the way they're doing that is with these very drastic cuts. So that's the context. Alex, I'll happily hand you the talking stick. Any thoughts on all of that?
There's a whole lot there. I read the 1,000 number. I did not realize it was 20% of their workforce. I'm not sure if I thought that was larger or smaller than I expected, but it is huge. Obviously, some of those jobs do cut into, and while they cut into jobs that people would have been nervous of AI coming for, I think is what I'm trying to say. Like, I feel like I am certain Tim Sweeney is correct in terms of AI was not the reason. It is future-proofing the company, trying to make sure they're making profits where they are. The idea that the drop of engagement is a bit like blaming the consumers, when in fact I think it's expenditure elsewhere. But it does make me think of,
it is a valid point to raise, but I kind of get where you're coming from. It is a bit like, we've given you all these really cool crossovers, and why are we not buying the skins, folks?
It kind of locks into this idea that you can go for, ongoing infinite growth kind of thing can be there. It's like, well, no, people will move on, people will drift and come back. And, some skins and some collaborations bring people in, but other ones people just don't understand. I don't know what the market, I don't know what Fortnite looks like in terms of player counts up and down. Like during an off season that, that doesn't resonate, do you see that like dip right down and then kick
Well,
back up
I
massively with the
think
right crossover?
you look at, I'm trying to think, Fortnite, the Battle Royale stuff kicked off in, I think, 2018,
That sounds about right.
I think maybe late 17, early 2018 sounds about right. You look for how long it's been going, it's had a very good run. I think the reality though is that, and it's one of the questions that I'd ask is, are we seeing this live service recession of sorts? We've got so many live service games. We've seen, I didn't think I was going to bring it up today. High Guard's back in the conversation, but we've seen these examples, of the High Guards, of the Concords, so many more games that don't get spoken about. There's such an oversaturation in live service. You've made the point about infinite growth. It's not realistic, and I think that it's very easy to paint Epic and Tim Sweeney as the bad guy in this situation. But I think, we've spoken about the Fortnite stuff before, about how expensive it'll be to run, how expensive the licensings are. If the reality is that the downturn in Fortnite's fortunes to some degree have massively shifted what Epic's bringing in, they do have to course correct, because if they don't, you could end up in a situation that's even worse in a year's time, and no one wants to see that. But my concern is that if Fortnite, which is one of the titans of the games industry still, if Epic Games and Fortnite are having issues, what does that say for the rest of the industry? And I think people maybe came into this year thinking we were past a lot of the bad, but
unless it means it's freeing those players up to play other things, as long as they're not Roblox, that could be a net positive for the industry. And I mean that just because that would be feeding into its own juggernaut, not.
Yeah. Well, you imagine, I don't know what every individual player's habits are, but I'd imagine that a lot of the people who are not playing Fortnite anymore are probably just playing other live service games. Not to put everyone within that community into the same basket, but they might now be playing Marvel Rivals. They might be playing, Marathon, or people are. I think live service games tend to, in my opinion, the audiences can be quite fickle. If they see something new and shiny and everyone's playing it, they're not loyal to that brand necessarily. They'll go and play whatever is trending, and it feels like maybe for the first time Fortnite is suffering because of that rather than winning because of it.
But there's a few other, I mean, you said before, obviously it's absolutely awful for these 1,000 people that are being let go. It looks like the severance package is pretty good.
Is very good. It's very good.
Yes, but at the same
time, to give Epic some credit, because they do deserve credit for that, because I think if you, not going to sit and talk about it, but if you go and look at the articles we're linking, the severance stuff is good, which is
they're
nice
trying to make
see.
sure people are looked after. They're so like in that regard, but all the same, like you've got to wonder, like obviously it's the people lower down that get cut, and it's the people at the top that make the decisions that end up resulting in them needing to be cut, which is always like the kind of like two sides of that. But absolutely feel for the people who have lost their jobs in this. But I do wonder, part of me wonders, like obviously not just over time, but also the people that came in. And one of the reasons I remember Fortnite being kind of said it was really popular is because that it was a shooting game that kids could play. So like, while their bigger brothers or whoever else were playing Call of Duty, this thing was there. And then that brought people down. It became this place that everybody could play. Thing is, then it was new. And, in the same way kind of Facebook kind of was outgrown. I do wonder how many of the people that came in and were playing it and played it through COVID, played it through all these other things, played it through lockdown, have now like gone to university or doing other things. And maybe just that age group of people that were kind of all caught in that period of Fortnite have just kind of like
have grown up.
moved into a place doing other things and maybe have more money to buy the games or doing these other things.
And to add to
And
your point, the younger ones who in 2018, 2019 were playing Fortnite because it was the in thing, because, you know, their parents can turn around and be like, okay, inherently we are shooting things here, but it couldn't be less. It couldn't be more careful if it tried. Well, that the next generation of those, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds, you've said the R word, they're playing Roblox. Probably. It feels like Roblox have stolen Epic's thunder here.
Some of Epic's thunder. Epic continue to feed that machine. I'm not saying that, but just it's percentages, right?
But I think it is true.
Yeah.
And I think it's a wider point, but I think the Roblox threat is part of the reason why they've invested so much into the island creation tools. I mean, I can't quite remember the figure, but I think it's around £750 million last year they paid out to creators of islands and such within Fortnite. So, you know, stuff that normal people are making, which is, you know, that's a lot of money. But I think that shows that the threat from Roblox must be real. And yeah, we're seeing this 14% dip in hours played. Well, you know, I'd imagine a degree of that 14% is going to be people who are going and playing Roblox or other games with UGC elements.
Yeah. To be very clear, we've got the same numbers everybody else does. Like it's all kind of a thought experiment in terms of could it be this?
But yeah, don't listen to anything we're saying. It could all be wrong.
I just want to make very clear that I don't know if that kind of shifting demographic but you know, everything reaches a point where it's aged out, and Fortnite was fortunate in the sense that it hit at a time that the technology hasn't shifted dramatically. Like, it still looks fantastic. It still plays really well. So it hasn't seen that kind of drop off you see on some mobile games where it's like, well, this is starting to look really old. Or WoW, where it's like, okay, like we've got to do incremental upgrades. But Fortnite
Alex
hasn't really
trashing World of Warcraft right there. She's a washed up.
No, not at all. Like, my understanding is, I've never played World of Warcraft to any level, but they've overhauled that and, you know, brushed it up incrementally. Fortnite hasn't need to go through the same level of overhaul as that in its kind of lifespan.
Yeah,
the cracks beneath the surface are not showing in that sense of things, but it doesn't stop people kind of aging out of it.
Yeah, I feel. I think that, you know, let's not act as if Fortnite is going to disappear anytime soon. I think the point we've made is that maybe there just needs to be a reevaluation, which is what this might be, of what the expectations are. If revenue's down, you know, you account for that, and, you know, for whatever you think about Tim Sweeney, he's, you know, he runs Epic Games. They're one of the biggest companies in the industry, so he's clearly good at doing what he's doing, and I think this decision won't have been an easy one. But yeah, I just repeat that point I made before, which is that if they don't do this now, what might things look like in a year? If it might be 14% drop in 2025, what if this year it's 30%, and all of a sudden they're in a panic mode because they're losing money?
I'm sure in many ways it'd be much easier to let people go 50 at a time, right? But ultimately they needed to reach whatever the end result of this is. That's the determination they've made. As said, while it's going to be incredibly hard for the people who are caught up in it, if that keeps 80% of people going, then that's the important thing there, and Fortnite and all the other parts tied up in that.
Yeah, we've got to keep Fortnite going.
We've
got to keep Fortnite going.
But it's absolutely crushing.
Yeah. But what we'll do was we've had a, you know, sad section here.
We'll roast, didn't it?
Yeah, we'll disappear. We'll go away for a moment, and then we'll come back and we'll look at this feel-good story about Square Enix, because I do like this one. I've got a lot of love for Square Enix. So we'll have a quick moment away. You'll see us in just a second, and when we come back, let's talk about Square Enix.
Good news. Give me a good news story, Tom.
I'll give you a good news story. Our final story. Okay, patience. Young Padawan. Okay, our final story takes us to Metacritic and Square Enix. The Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy publisher has been crowned as the aggregator's P1 number one publisher for 2025, the first time ever after 16 years. I'm sure that everyone in Square Enix HQ is delighted by this
16
news.
years
They've
of
jumped.
Metacritic running.
Yes, not of Square Enix. Not of Square Enix. God, if they, imagine 16 years they pumped out a Final Fantasy every year. And all 500 spin-offs they've done. But they've jumped from 6th place last year to the top spot. They had 9 eligible games, which all received a 75 plus positive Metacritic score. The success came from a real mix of big AAA projects and smaller. I've put niche in quotations because I don't think this is a niche, but it is to some people. But we've got these high quality games, the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth release on PC. We've got the Final Fantasy Tactics remake. I'm not going to try and do the second part of that game's title. That's not happening. We've got the Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D remake. And then we've got the latest Octopath game, Octopath Traveler 0. Just a few of the bigger ones for Square Enix. Interestingly, Sony, Nintendo, both absent from the top 10. 2025 was very much the year of the third parties, I guess, in that way. And then Microsoft at 5th, which whatever Microsoft are. I think, funnily...
whoever that encompasses.
Yeah, whoever that is at this point. But what I found quite funny, and it's not related to this, but Ubisoft came 11th and Nintendo came 12th. So as much as everyone can dunk on Ubisoft, it seems that Welcome Tour and Drag and Drive brought Nintendo below Ubisoft, but the story here is Square Enix.
Nintendo's got a really wild ride because I've been checking it while you've been going over this, and they are the only company to have more than one great game, and they've got 3.
Then that's, I think it's Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, and Donkey Kong, isn't it?
It's Zelda twice.
So Nintendo have kind of cheesed it a bit. But to raise the question, Square Enix's success is kind of similar. You know, we're seeing the release of Rebirth on PC. That was their highest ranking game last year. Obviously, that's the deviation away from the PlayStation exclusive strategy, which we've known they've not been successful with for quite a while. But, you know, Octopath Traveler 2, that's in the HD 2D engine. We've got the remake of Final Fantasy Tactics, Dragon Quest 1 and 2, both remakes in the HD 2D engine. My question, Alex, is this success very much dependent on nostalgia? Because it feels like a lot, and it's clever, but it feels like a lot of Square Enix's success in the last few years is looking back at the past, bringing those experiences to new audiences, and doing a really good job of it.
I mean, yes, clearly it is.
Correct answer. There we go. Yeah. Next question.
Whether that's people who played them originally and want to go back to them, and whether it is introducing it to a new audience is obviously a huge part of that. But also they're really cornering a market in where they sit. I mean, these are all games that really sit in a single place. To like the numbers on it are 19 products across 9 titles. And I think is the only game there that's new, the Final Fantasy. I don't want to say remakes because that's not what they are. Not even reimaginings. I'm not sure what
remixes, aren't they?
I'm not even sure they're that by what I've heard of them. I mean,
they're basically, as someone who never played the originals, I finished Remake on the Switch. I've currently started playing Rebirth on PS5. I understand that they're essentially Final Fantasy VII in name and nothing else.
Characters,
so definitely dependent on the name recognition and the character recognition, but very much a new start for Final Fantasy VII. But yeah, I applaud Square Enix because I think what they're doing, and I don't know all the facts and the figures and stuff, but it feels like what they're doing is having a lot of success from games with, I imagine, quite small budgets in comparison to a lot of other games. They're recognizing that we're good at what we're good at. We can polish up these games. We make really good JRPGs. We've got a load of great RPGs in the past. We can put some new ones in there. We can, Octopath Traveler 0 is a reimagining of a mobile game with loads of new elements. So pretty much everything they released last year has already come out at some point in the past.
It does throw up a few questions, though, doesn't it, in terms of why they've never appeared at number one in the past? Because they're actually games that reviewed well, so I don't know how they would have played into it. But they had the Tomb Raider games, they had the Deus Ex games, they had the Hitman games all under their umbrella for a long time there. Had that
I think
racing thing that I think had like massively
very bad reviews,
a load of charging, very bad reviews, a lot of charges. And I think they were trying to embrace NFTs for a while. Square's had a dotted history, so it shows that they've worked out a formula that works for them.
Well, I think what they've done
the returns
is
as well.
The point you've made. I think the answer to that is if you go and look at what they released last year, there's no filler. And if you look even 2 or 3 years ago, the reason why they're getting dragged down in these rankings is because, you've released Final Fantasy VII Remake. I think that's a brilliant game. Some people might not, but you've released this brilliant game. But you've also released 2 absolute stinkers, to use a very industry term. But that's what's dragged them down is those weaker releases. Whereas last year felt very, we're just because to be fair to them, I look at this list and I think that's great game after great game. I don't care if they're brand new or they're remakes or they're this or they're that. I just look and I think, brilliant game after brilliant game, and that success that they've earned critically is deserved, and they've stopped releasing bad games. It's that easy, guys. Just only release good games.
No more chocolate.
Only release good games, and you too can be Metacritic's number one publisher.
But I think the other thing that you've hit on there that is another reason that. So I imagine Square, obviously, everybody always wants to be the number one publisher in terms of reviews. I'm sure it has amazing knock-on effects down the line. But I think the other thing is that, and you pointed this out, these are probably quite targeted. They're making efficient use of their engine, and they've got probably a very clear pipeline, as opposed to the Western games that they were putting out that they were never happy with the returns on those. So I think this could be it was no doubt a very good year for Square. And if this is the path they're going down, and they're going to double down on this.
Which I imagine they are. I mean, we've already
centric, I guess, is the thing.
Yeah, and you think I'm keen to wrap so we can get into the rundown, but I think my last point would be that will they continue doing this? It seems that they will. Yes. You look at this year, we've already had Remake on the Switch 2, which is doing fantastically. Right now, 40% off. So I'd really recommend it if anyone's not played it. Digital, maybe it's more expensive physical, following Nintendo's lead. But we've had the Rebirth is coming to Xbox and Switch 2, or it might already be out on Xbox, but it's coming to Switch 2 later this year. You had the remake of Dragon Quest VII with that lovely visual style, which I think we'll see popping up in more remakes, I imagine. So it does feel like they've recognized a hopefully sustainable way of publishing and developing games, and that decision has been rewarded with, being recognized as having a really strong year, and I'm all for it. One of the points we'll talk about in the rundown is counterintuitive to this idea of budgeting well and other such stuff. So I think Square Enix is very much an example for other companies perhaps to look at and try and embrace the way that they're going about things.
It probably is worth stepping, because obviously you've got Capcom at 3, which did very well, and it was a port that kind of helped bring them down. I don't want to. We do have to jump into the final bit, but one thing that I do want to shout out is that an ex-client of ours, Camera, are on there. Number 2, which is a Chinese publisher that they put out a lot of titles. They only released 5 games last year, but they were all well reviewed. Really putting them in at 2, which is
one of 2 publishers to receive nothing but green Metacritic scores.
Green Metacritic, yeah. And I mean,
green
they've
is
only
good.
Put things out on PC, I imagine, looking at the fact they've only got 5 products, because 5 titles, 5 products, whereas it was 19 products, 9 titles for Square, because they're across multiple platforms. But absolutely worth shouting out. They're obviously really picking their games well. They're choosing to publish, and great to see newer blood being injected into that list. Because if you look at the previous top tens, it's all the kind of
I mean, if you look
brands
elsewhere as well, we will move on. But we've got Thunderful at number 4. A bit further down, got Emu at number 9. Raw Fury, number 10. Trying to see if we've got any more of the Devolver, number 14. Don't Nod. I know Don't Nod are a tiny company, but Atari, number 20. They're above Sony. Atari are better than Sony.
They also are Thunderful. You end up going around in circles. But yes, I just thought it was worth shouting out. Somebody that a publisher that might be less well known is right up there.
Yeah, but fantastic. So we'll head away now. We had that nice feel good story. Well done, Square Enix. I've played pretty much all of these games, so I'm part of the reason. Yeah, I'm looking at these 4. I've bought every single one, apart from the remake of Dragon Quest 1 and 2. But yeah, well done, Square. Here we are, we're back. Rapid rundown time, and this one is going to be very rapid because Alex has just reminded me with a lot of anger in his eyes. He's like, I need to be out of here very soon. So we're gonna go through these really quickly. First story of the rundown: Marathon launched a few weeks ago, and despite being a first-party title, some of the sales data we're seeing for this indicates that Steam sales are around 70% of its sales, with PS5 being just 19%. I think we've seen Sony, by all accounts, are pulling away from PC, aside from their multiplayer games.
I was about to say, I bet they're glad they haven't done that already.
Well, apart from the multiplayer games, and I think this is why, because Steam is the place to go for shooters, and and I think we're seeing that with the data here. Yeah, it's very much doing well on Steam. PS5, not so much. So I think it shows that Sony's kind of doing the right thing.
I think any game that requires a larger active player base to make the game good for the native, however you want to look at it, platform needs that broader reach. So yeah,
because I think it has I imagine it has crossplay. So it makes total sense. If you're releasing something multiplayer, don't just release it on console. Is the message there? Another message from Jason Schreier is stop spending so much on making games. Jason Schreier, very much Bloomberg journalist and brilliant author too, very much one of the most in-the-know sources in the industry, has this week spoken about the fact that he is aware of budgets for games that are up to AAA games that are up to $300 million or even more in some cases. I know you said before, Alex, well, that's GTA's the more. But yeah, I kind of did some back of the coaster maths on this, or whatever the term is. If a game had a $300 million budget, it retails for $70. You take away the platform's 30%. Every game that has that budget has to sell 6 million to break even
at full price.
At full price, yeah, that's an even stronger point, which a little bit concerning. Well done, Square Enix, who are not doing that, unless you're telling me that Dragon Quest remakes cost $300 million to make.
Well, that's what I was about to say. Like, I do think it does explain, if this is the size of title, if that's how much they think they've got to spend to get that kind of sales, then of course you're going to see fewer and fewer original games occupying those top spots.
But you wait for Final Fantasy VII remake in 2040. We're going back to Midgar, but this time we're only going to do the first chapter.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Bring it all around. Like it's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, but I think I always think in Spider-Man 2, because I think that was one of the ones where the leaks showed that it costs about $220, and that includes the license. But there was a mission in that where you could interact for 10 minutes. That was how long the mission was. You're in a full theme park. You can ride on a roller coaster. You can go and play some of the games, and that's great. But then I think, how much did this cost to make for what is 10 minutes of a 20-hour game.
Spider-Man's different anyway. I mean, that because it's locked onto PlayStation, or at least it was at the point of its release, it was also to help drive platform sales, so it could afford to be a loss leader. That doesn't work for non-platform holders. So,
no, I mean, it couldn't afford to be that much of a loss leader because Insomniac laid off a load of people. Guys, we were happy to take a loss. We're not this big. God, come on. But yeah, our final little story this week is Behaviour Interactive, known for Dead by Daylight, have acquired the Fun Pimps, who are the developers of 7 Days to Die. And we're seeing more and more examples of bigger independent studios consolidating with smaller studios to form these bigger studios, a lot of studios that are really focused on genre niches. So horror in this case. And we've seen a few examples, but I think this is one of the biggest that we've seen.
Did you say that Dead by Daylight, it brings Dead by Daylight and 7 Days to Die kind of in under the same catalog, being because Behaviour puts out other games, but I think what that screams to me, and you kind of said this, Tom, I kind of expanded on it in my brain in the interim.
Expand upon it for everyone else too, so they can.
Yeah, I was about to. I was
getting in your brain,
building to it. I imagine the people at the Fun Pimps, was it? Yes, probably kind of like wondering what the next project is, but they're also sat on this cash cow, which if they keep it moving, keep the content coming in and the new stuff, and that it is going to be an ongoing community center, not community center for a community. And sales and revenue driver. And maybe they're just like, okay, one, we want to move on to building these deals and things is getting harder. Whereas Behaviour are like, no, we've got this absolutely in the bag.
Yeah, we know how to
the
do
right
this.
people already.
Yeah.
Let's just put this through the sausage machine and push it out in both directions, kind of thing.
It's very symbiotic, isn't it? I think both sides help each other here. And I think this is, I don't love acquisitions, but I think this is a really good example of one. It makes total sense. I think as you said, for the Fun Pimps, it gives them a bit of flexibility to, they can stay doing what they're doing, but if they want to try something else, they can. And if it's within a similar genre, they've got an expert who knows, with the PR brain I've got here, they know all the content creators. They know all the people to reach out to if they want to do events. They know everyone in the space.
All the partnerships for new characters, cinematic.
Makes perfect sense.
And also, for the Fun Pimps, that they're probably sat there going like, okay, do we ride this right the way down until we start to see the diminishing returns diminish to the point that we have to let people go, or do we start something new now? Because it's hard to, if you're a small team, it's hard to run these two things concurrently, like building something new and maintaining where you are. So this could really free them up to do more. Yeah, which is exciting to see. Hopefully, it will be good for both of them.
No, yeah, I agree. But yeah, and there we are. Done.
There we are.
That's it. See you later. No, that's it for another rapid rundown. That is the end of today's downloads. As always, if you have enjoyed it, if you're new to the download community, I guess be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from, whether you're listening or you're watching on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe so you can stick around and catch future episodes. If you want to read more of these stories, we have our LinkedIn weekly download newsletter, which is available every Friday, summarizes all the biggest stories from the week in a very easy to read fashion. We've also got the daily download, which is our Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday newsletter, 5 days a week, straight to your inbox. You can find a link to that in the description below as well, so you can click that. You get stories every day. We also have all the latest events and more fun things sprinkled in there as and when we see them. But that's it. Alex, thank you very much for being here. As always, a stalwart of the podcast. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much to everyone for listening, and we will see you all next time. Goodbye.